All right, welcome to another episode of the Bioinformatics Lab podcast. I'm Kevin Lipwitt, joined today with Andrew Page. We're from Theogen, and today we're going to be talking about bioinformatics conferences. There's a ton out there, many different opportunities, really around the world to meet up with, connect, share, hear from all the different practitioners across the field. And it can be quite difficult to know exactly where to go, what conferences are available, because there hasn't been really a central repository and an effort to curate all the different bioinformatics conferences until now.
Yeah, so Lee Katz from CDC has published on his blog actually a long list of all the bioinformatics conferences he could find and think of, and when they are, and how often they are, because it gets quite confusing. Kind of remembering all these things, you end up going to the same ones each time. So it's phenomenally good to have just something like that at your fingertips, and you can just scan down through it. And of course, conferences are just a fantastic way to meet people. During the pandemic, there was a lot of virtual conferences and stuff, which are okay, but actually it's the social interactions which are really important. And I get really energized coming back from a conference, just chatting to so many different people and, even about topics that are not related to science. It's just you get to know people, you get to know the field better, you get to hear things that you wouldn't normally hear. And then when it comes to setting up collaborations, you have a ready-made group of people and contacts there that you can draw on, or you can send stuff their way, the best person for the job kind of deal. So I really enjoy conferences, and I have a few that I really enjoy going to. So in microbial bioinformatics, you got your ABPHM, Applied Bioinformatics and Public Health Microbiology, which is held every 2 years in Hinxton here in the UK. It's about 10 minutes from me. And that was set up, about 15 years ago, maybe at this point. Oh, maybe longer. And it's just a really nice, small conference of literally our fields, very UK focused though. And it's very much everyone is doing bioinformatics and public health gets together, and it's awesome. Nice venue, about 150 people. And yeah, we were there a few months ago.
Yes, and that was my first time attending that conference. As you said, it's relatively UK focused. I would say a bit even Eurocentric. Some folks outside of the UK. Not very many Americans out there. I think whenever we were out there, maybe there was less than 10 US folks out there. And going into that conference, it's pretty difficult to get to. It's in Hinxton, right? And it's one of those conferences that when I was looking at it, it's like, oh, I can't wait to go there in England. Then you're looking, it's like, oh, how the heck do I get to Hinxton? I got to fly into, I think, Cambridge and take a train or whatever it is. And as I was planning, I was a bit frustrated. Like, why didn't they just hold it in London? It would have been so easier to just get in and get out. But then when I got to Hinxton, I was like, oh, this is sweet. This is a campus. It felt like it was a dedicated space. You're away from the bustle. And it was a whole, you're on a campus. You're not in a city. You're in the campus there, and you're able to concentrate with a really concentrated group of people on the field of applied public health bioinformatics. And I thought it was an incredible one to go to for the first time. I hope more US folks are able to attend.
Absolutely. And I worked on a campus for many years in the Sanger Institute, and I absolutely love it. It's a beautiful green campus. It was originally a hunting lodge for one of these super rich English people many years ago, where you go off to hunt and drink and smoke. And so that they've turned all of that and very lovingly restored parts of it and integrated new bits to make this very beautiful conference center. So I really enjoy it. Going back there, it's only 10 minutes from my house, so it's an easy one to get to for me. Unlike you, with planes, trains, and automobiles. But yeah, the US equivalent then is ASM NGS, next generation sequencing pipelines. Just everyone calls it ASM NGS, and you've been there before, I know, because I've met you there.
Yeah, that's a great one. I would definitely say that's the analog to the ABPHM world. It's not super technical. It's also very applied. So there's a huge overlap with academia and public health scientists. So I first got introduced to that conference when I was at the Virginia State Public Health Laboratory, and we were going through this exact exercise of which conferences should we go. And we saw this announcement from ASM because sometimes we go to the ASM, or we used to go to the ASM Microbe Conference, which is the huge general one, which is 5,000 people in a major US city. But that can be a bit overwhelming. Yeah, maybe you follow the microbial or the public health track, but still it's a little too big to feel super effective in that way. Whereas ASM and GS, I love that kind of smaller size conference. I would even say maybe mid-size conference, about 150-ish
Yeah.
or so people, where you could essentially know everybody in the whole, or at least get a chance to meet all of the speakers one-on-one during the sort of networking events. And that's, how ASM NGS is also done. So for the US folks, a lot of the state practitioners, a lot of the state public health bioinformatics working group folks attend that one regularly, and you're going to get a good insight in terms of the major US programs, in terms of the PulseNet initiatives, the HAIs, in ARLN programs, and all the different bioinformatics applications associated with that. Also every 2 years. And it's worth noting ABPHM was held last year, so there won't be one in 2024, whereas ASM NGS, there will be one in October of this year.
And they deliberately did that because the two conferences are sister conferences, and so they and a lot of shared people on committees, so they deliberately staggered them in that fashion. And actually, within our little community as well, usually there's a hackathon associated with one of those. And so with the last ABPHM, I ran a hackathon before it in Cambridge, in one of the colleges there. And I know I've been to hackathons as well at ASM NGS, before or after, depending on how it all works out. And it's quite nice because, they're microbial bioinformatics hackathons. We've even numbered them, because we've had so many. I think we're up to about 9 or 10 at this point. It's kind of crazy, that we've sustained it for so long. And it's informal. It's just someone goes, oh yeah, the conference is here near us. I'll organize a hackathon. And it just seems to work out. So I'm actually looking forward to ASM NGS next year, when someone is going to organize a hackathon. Don't know. Probably won't be me because I'm not in the US.
We'll see who we can find as a volunteer. Yeah, maybe we'll put our name in the hat of being able to organize those efforts. But like you said also in the beginning, those hackathons help to encourage that network building and community building, because you have dedicated days where you work on a specific project and you stay in your little group to just focus and figure out, how does this person think? What is their background? What do they add to this context? What can I add to this context? So I am, especially maybe for younger or earlier career scientists who are thinking about these conferences, there's often fellowships, student travel support, and things like that associated with these conferences. I know for sure ASM NGS had these available because I was a beneficiary of some of these. And I know ABPHM and the hackathons there, that you set up some travel support for a lot of students and other practitioners.
In fact, we found it difficult to even give money away because some people work for government and they're not allowed to take money from, say, foreign governments or grants like that. And so we actually found it quite difficult to even give money away for some of these hackathons, even though we had it. So, there's always, a way and a means. If you really want to get somewhere, we'll find a way.
It's an interesting problem to have. But and that was actually, I think, the impetus for Lee's in creating this list. You have a fiscal budget and you're trying to figure out where do you want to go in the conferences. That's huge on the government side, is, a year prior to actually going to these things, you have to dictate or, articulate where you want to go. So hopefully for the more technical applied folks, I think those are two really great conferences. It's not crazy academic into the nuances of new algorithms. More so it's a highlight of, hey, how have the best practice algorithms been applied and have been implemented? And then there's maybe some on the edges of newer applications in terms of things like, metagenomic amplicon based sequencing. That's like some of that gets talked about there, but the heart of it is implementation and utility on the public health side.
So what do you think of these mega conferences? Like here in the UK, we have a MicroSoc, and that's like, again, 5,000 people. Yeah. And then I've been to, say, ISMB a few times, and that is absolutely ginormous. And then AGBT as well, which is more sequencer focused. And that's, again, so packed. What's your opinions on these?
I am not a huge fan of them at this point in my career, because I like the concentrated networking component where it's a small group of people that I'm communicating with and discussing ideas with over a week or so. I would say when I was earlier in, I loved the glitz and glamour of the huge event. And when I first got in, it was like, oh, the field of microbiology is intense. I remember like the keynote speakers at ASM Microbe were always like wild. I think if I remember 2016 or so, I think it was like Bill Gates who was up there. I was like, wow, yeah. So it was something like,
Crazy.
okay, this is really mind blowing, but it's so exhausting. I think it's, for me, it was 5 days and you're trying to figure out where to go. It's usually spread across multiple buildings in
Yeah.
a huge city, that it's a bit overwhelming on my end, for to take much away from 5,000 attendee meeting. But I understand the exposure. So I feel like if you're just getting in the field, going into that is going to be a crazy splash into the ocean of what's happening across the field in a huge swath, comprehensive sort of conference. What about you?
So what
What's
I
your
found
take
with
on that?
what I
Yeah,
found with some of these big conferences is all the talks you want to go to are usually all at the same time in like five
yeah,
different parallel sessions, and it's like I can't split myself. And then there's gaps where there's nothing really, and that's the problem with conferences where they might have 10 parallel tracks, and often you'll get side meetings bolted on as well onto those, and it's like there's so much going on and so much interesting stuff and so many people. It can be overwhelming sometimes, and you just can't get to do everything you want to do. So there is very careful timetable management there
yeah,
to get the most out of it. And then it can be a bit exhausting as well, because they can run from very early to very late. Yeah,
yeah.
and then you're obviously networking later.
Well, yeah, yeah. So, but also with like ABPHM and I think ASM NGS is like this as well. GMI, where we spoke about earlier this year, it's less than 200 people, so which is large enough, or rather small enough, where you can have a single plenary session for all the talks, and then poster sessions for throughout. So everybody is able to hear every talk, all the important talks. It's not like that schedule conflict that you discussed. It's we're all talking about the very specific things we all have traveled to speak about, and I like that feel. It feels effective. It feels pragmatic. And effective in terms of being able to travel to these things.
And I guess the Phage conference is going to be a big thing on the radar in the future.
Yes, yes, Phage
Absolutely.
definitely. That was got to be my favorite conference in terms of venue and production. Was unbelievable. I unmatched really. I think the Phage Secretariat did an incredible job out there in the Stellenbosch region in a vineyard overlooking just the beautiful landscape that is South Africa. And that is also one that's going to be held every 2 years. I think the next location still to be determined, as the last one was just a couple months ago.
Yeah. And then I guess there's which is on it's more the epi side of the
Yes.
micro
You going
side.
to this
So
conference?
I was at in Bath, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's pretty cool. But it's slightly bigger as well. It's probably what 300 people, but it is one session, and
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And it was all the same people actually who go to ABPHM and ASM NGS. Yeah, it's the same
Yes.
faces you see all the time. Particular small little niches. Outside of that, you don't really see them. Um, but yeah, that's another really really nice one.
Yeah. And then on the US side, we analogous to MEM. Again, a lot of those European conferences, you don't see a lot of US folks there, which is actually a bit of an unfortunate circumstance because there could
Yeah,
be so much more collaboration. So, for example, the first, I would say, European meeting I went to, which isn't really just a European specific one, but it was held in Brussels, was the Bill and Melinda Gates Grand Challenges. It was held out in Brussels. And I've been going to the U.S. conferences, the ASM NGSs, the APHLs that we haven't spoken on, but all the U.S. Trade shows, as it were, on our end. And then I went to the Brussels conference for the first time being in Europe, and I realized how isolated I had been to the whole European, African, and Asian practitioner network. And they all knew each other, and I was like, oh man, there was a whole cohort of practitioners that I was just meeting for the first time. So if there's Americans out there listening to this, if it's at all possible from your institution to get international funding, huge recommendation to see if you can get the funding to make that leap over to the ABPHMs, the MMs, and all the like, because that global
yeah.
network is just becoming more and more relevant as things progress.
I guess what we're talking about is more society conferences and academic conferences, but there is a totally different category of kind of pure commercial conferences, commercial companies that just run conferences on topical topics. And there are a lot of them, and the quality I've found, I've interviewed them, it can vary
Yeah.
substantially. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't get the same out of it. It's very much more about networking than about the actual talks and science. A little bit of that. but then it you have to be very careful when you go to them because it can be very expensive and you may not get very much out of it. Particularly if you're, at an earlier stage in your career, you pretty much won't get anything out of it unless you're looking for a job. You might get hired. So yeah, that it's a very stark difference. And of course, all these society conferences, will have a lot of studentships and low fees for members and things like that. Whereas these commercial conferences are, it's purely for the money, which is okay. And it can be sometimes difficult to distinguish between the two of them. I found.
Yeah. So again, for the folks that are planning conferences, looking to plot out your year of travel, Lee put this great list together. You'll see links to all the different conferences from his curated, I don't know, database or page of conferences. I don't know how active he's keeping it up to date. Maybe, as other practitioners here in the field, we can help to relieve that burden and make sure things are updated and accurate. But I think those are more or less the major conferences we hit. We talked about ABPHM, ASM NGS, MM, and ASM. What else did we talk about? Oh, the APHL conferences on the US side.
Yeah.
Those
awesome.
are the major ones.
Well, I think we'll leave it there then. We could talk about conferences all day, but I think
absolutely. And likely we'll do conference specific ones every time we go to these different ones. So yeah, good luck with everyone on your conference planning. We'll see you in the next one.